Hey everybody, it's Dana and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to make a masculine Valentine's Day card and we're going to be using some alcohol inks. I don't play with my alcohol inks nearly enough. So I thought I would just do like a beginner's card using alcohol inks. And I have Slate, Black, and Smolder here. And these are going to be the colors we're going to use today. They're really, really pretty. And I thought, let's just go for it today. Let's do something different. I do have some Q-tips here I'm going to use, and I have some gloves. I always wear gloves when I'm messing around with alcohol inks because I don't like to get too inky on my fingers, and I just did a manicure, so we don't want to mess that up. So I do also have my Tim Holtz glass mat. This is a travel size mat. I love this mat because it's small enough that I can tuck it in my suitcase, I can travel with it, or I can pull it out and put it on my desk whenever I need it. So now since I'm all gloved up, we're going to go ahead and get started. I am using a plastic paper today, very similar to Yupo, and it's going to help my alcohol ink kind of glide across the paper. I'll link all the products below for you guys to take a peek and see if you want to recreate this card. So make sure when you are using any of your alcohol pearl inks, you do want to shake those up really well to make sure that everything is blended nicely in your bottle. I am going to start off with my blending solution. And as you can see, I had tightened this up really tight. It took me a minute to kind of get that off of there. Now, wherever I put the alcohol ink is where the ink is going to flow. So I know I already want it to just kind of flow across my paper. So I'm going to start there. Now, with alcohol ink, you just got to let it flow, y'all. That's all I have to say. It's very hard to control, but they give beautiful results. Now, with this plastic paper I'm using here, if I ever messed up and wanted to start again, I could easily wipe all this off with some blending solution or alcohol, and then I can start all over again. As you can see, I just kind of put like dots down the center of where I want this ink to flow. And I added a little bit more of the blending solution. And all I'm going to do is just tip this back and forth. Just going to tip it to kind of get those colors to blend. Once they start blending, I'm going to tilt all the way to one side and all the way back to the other. As you can see, I'm just going back and forth just to get those colors to blend. As you can see, it's so pretty. It is absolutely so pretty. I love watching alcohol ink move across paper. I think it's mesmerizing to me. I'm going to go ahead and tap off any of the excess. And now I have this gorgeous gradient going across my paper. Now, before I start again, I am going to clean up that ink off of my glass mat because I just don't want to get this on the back of this paper. But look how gorgeous this is. I have various shades of gray going across my paper. Now, for me, I wanted to add a little bit more because I want to do something a little bit creative with this. So I'm going to go back in and I'm going to add a little bit more slate. And this time I'm just going to kind of like run it. I'm going to put a couple dots and like kind of run it along that gradient line. And then I'm going to go back in with that blending solution. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and start tilting this. So when you tilt your paper, you see like you get the runners, like the little legs. That is very pretty, but I kind of don't want that look. I want it to be a little bit softer. So I'm going to tilt that paper down, kind of get that ink all to one side to kind of like fill up that open white areas that you see. Again, with alcohol ink, you just got to let it flow. Don't worry about controlling it. Just let the ink do what it wants to do. I added a little bit more of that blending solution so I can get that flow going a little bit better. And again, I'm kind of tilting the card to get rid of like those larger white areas and to get like the legs that I call them, like the running part, to kind of move a little bit and kind of disappear. So as you can see, my color is a little bit lighter, and that's because I added more of that blending solution. So I like where I am right here. This is like a great beginner's part to work with alcohol inks. So I'm going to stop at this point. Now you can keep going adding more color, but I know this is the softness that I'm looking for. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop and I'm gonna heat set this. Now I am heat setting this on a low temperature just so that it dries because alcohol ink does dry really, really fast. I kind of want to set everything in place. So I get these really pretty different colors of gray with just a little bit of a light black. Once that's done, I'm going to get creative. This is the license to just do whatever feels right to you. So with the alcohol pearls, I'm just going to put a little bit of that on my glass mat. And now I'm going to go ahead and use a Q-tip to kind of just draw my own design on this. So I decided that I just wanted a little bit of lines going across this instead of adding the pearl to the alcohol. This is a great way to kind of just test out the alcohol if you're brand new to it and just create your own design. It always does not have to be like a wash of alcohol. You can actually create something in this. So for me today, this is just a creative process. There's no true design in my head. Besides that, I knew I wanted to have some lines on this, kind of looking like maybe tree branches or maybe marble. Once I had that done, I decided now to kind of go in and just add some dots to this. And this is like the controlled part of alcohol inks. I'm now just placing it where I want it. Compared to using the solution, which moves everything, I'm really doing a concentrated design on this. So using that Q-tip and just the pearl, I'm able to create my own design. So look how gorgeous that is. And this is going to work for a fantastic masculine card. So I created my own like designer look per se, and I have a little bit of that smolder pearl, and it just looks gorgeous. So as I set this aside to dry, I'm going to keep this card very simple and just place a sentiment. Now I chose to use vellum today in a larger sentiment for this. So the stamp set that I'm using today is called Love's Greeting Mix. This is from Simon Says Stamp. And I'm going to use one of the larger sentiments in here. So because I have the vellum, I can use this large sentiment here, kind of place it across my card. And because I'm using the vellum, it's not going to take up too much real estate. It's just going to kind of dull down that area where I have the vellum, but you'll still be able to see the design. So I'm going to bring in my Misty here, and I'm going to go ahead and put in the vellum. The vellum I'm using is the Hero Arts Layering Vellum. I'll go ahead and pop that in the corner. Now I do want to treat this vellum with the anti-static tool. So I am using the cute little one that I picked up from Simon Says Stamp, and I'll go ahead and run that across the vellum. Now, the sentiment I'm using is more of a vertical profile instead of horizontal, and that's going to work nicely so it sits square in the middle of that diagonal alcohol design that we have. So I can go ahead and place that down, and I'm just going to leave a little bit of room off to the side so I can trim this down a little bit later. So because I am going to be doing some heat embossing today, I went ahead, like I said, and treated the vellum, and now I'm going to use Versamark, which is just a watermark ink, and this is going to help the embossing powder stick. Now, when using vellum, I do try to make sure everything's tucked nicely in the corner because I am going to stamp this down twice. So I'll go ahead and rub my fingers over it. Now, because this sentiment, the font of the sentiment is a little bit thicker, I can add a little bit more pressure to this. I'll go ahead and lift that up. Again, I will shift that vellum back into the corner of my Misty, and then I can go ahead and stamp this again. Now, if you notice, my Versamark pad is really dirty, but fear not, if your pad looks anything like mine, it just means that it's been loved on and we've used it a lot. I can just go ahead and press down one more time, and whatever is on that ink pad as far as color wise is not going to transfer onto my vellum. Once I have that done, I just double check to make sure I have the design and I can see it. And now I can go ahead and add in the embossing powder. Now, if you wanted to, you can also stamp this in white pigment ink and then sprinkle on your embossing powder as well. So I am using the Hero Arts Detail White embossing powder, and I'll go ahead and sprinkle that across my vellum. I have a good amount on there, and then I can go ahead and tap off any excess I have. I'm just double checking at this point just to make sure I have enough of that powder on there before I heat set. Now, I did get some embossing powder on my mat. I have this We Are Memory Keepers. It's like a lint roller. I'm not sure if they still sell this, but I will try to find something I can link below for you because it is great on cleaning up glitter, embossing powder, anything that's on your desktop that you need removed. This little cleaner upper, I want to call it, like lint roller, really helps me out. So I just made sure everything was cleared off and I just had the sentiment there. Now, when I use vellum, or really anytime I'm heat embossing, I like to start from the back to get that embossing powder like melting, and then I go around to the front. And I'm going to do this several times from the front and the back. That's one going to help with the bowing of this vellum, but also if you do it with regular paper, it helps as well. Now, you'll know when your embossing powder is heated because it goes from like a matte white to more of a shiny white. And that's when you know that all your embossing powder is heated. So I'm just going to check to make sure everything is looking good, and it does. So now we can go ahead and start working on the rest of the card. So I did want to trim this down. So I am using my waffle flower A2 layering dies. I could trim this down with my paper trimmer, but I like using a die because it kind of gives it a softer edge. So if you have any rectangle dies, I also have the Hero Arts rectangle dies. These are perfect for just trimming down a sentiment. And I picked one that really closely came in on my sentiment because I don't really want too much vellum. I am using some mint tape here, and I'll go ahead and run this through my die cut machine. So look how pretty that looks. It's not going to take up too much of the design, but it's going to allow me to go over that alcohol ink and just have a pretty sentiment. Now for my glue, I'm using a very precise glue method here. And this is the Gina K glue in here. And I'm just making sure to put tiny little dots. I don't want to add too much glue because I don't want it to like score out onto my vellum where you can see it. So I'm just doing tiny little dots exactly where the sentiment is. So it's going to hide nicely right behind that sentiment. Now I can go ahead and flip that over and lay that down on my card panel. And what I like about the sentiment and the vellum, again, it doesn't distract from the design we created. It's just enough that it's at the top where the H is at the top and the H on the bottom if it's squarely in the middle of that design that we have. So this is a really easy beginning way to get familiar with alcohol inks, and it truly does make a great card. And since I'm still doing my Valentine's Day cards, this is perfect for a Valentine's Day card. And it's a great one for a masculine Valentine's Day card. So I did feel like I wanted to add just a few more things to this, but I do want to start with my card base. So this is Hero Arts Dove White card base, and we're going to be using our standard A2 size, which is going to be 4¼ by 5½. I do like to use my square buddy here to go ahead and crease down that line, and then I use my bone folder to really get that nice deep crease. Once that is done, I can move that out of the way and we can go ahead and put this on top of our card. Now, this is going to cover the entire card panel, which is gorgeous. Now, if you did want to trim this down, you could totally do that. But I just felt like I wanted everything to stand out with the alcohol inks that I use and not so much of having a white border around. Once I use some liquid adhesive here, which is perfect because once I put this into place, I do have the opportunity to like move this around just a tad bit compared to like if I used a tape runner. So as you can see, this is a gorgeous alcohol ink background card. And again, remember, we did our own little whimsical design in the background, and that is a perfect way to kind of get familiar with your alcohol inks. Next, I did find some enamel dots from Hero Arts that matched this alcohol ink perfectly. And there's circles like the little circles that we made in the background. So it's going to keep everything consistent. So I do like to use my tweezers to get these little enamel dots off of the plastic. It's just a great tip. You can just use your tweezers, kind of pick at it a little bit because these do have glue on the back of them. You don't have to add any glue. So you can just use your tweezers to kind of slide that into place. And because they're nice and small and they match our alcohol ink, we don't have to worry about anything being too distractive when it comes to the sentiment area. Now, I just grabbed a few of these, two at the top and two at the bottom, and that just pulls in the circle concept onto that vellum part. So we are done. Look how gorgeous this card turned out. So play with your alcohol inks. Even if you're a beginner, you can make a totally beautiful card with a little bit of pizzazz with your own design. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap up our card for today. I will see you guys in another video soon. Take care, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.